Here's an interesting scenario. If you've been following my YouTube channel, you'll know that I pretty much always recommend people to be concise in their answers. And this is simply because, the concise answers are the ones that sound the best to me. Not to say there are not exceptions, but I always used to even go as far as to recommend 2.5 minutes at some point, which, I don't believe it's the best advice for any role, but it certainly makes sense for many candidates, for most candidates, I would even argue. Now, the thing is that I received feedback that candidates have been advised to spend 10 minutes for each answer that they give in an interview. And first of all, I don't think that's necessarily a bad feedback. I certainly see scenarios where this makes sense. But I would like to add a few more notes and a few elements that you would want to consider when going with these long answers. So, first of all, such feedback is usually received after you pass the phone screening rounds and you're preparing for an on-site interview. Also, more often than not, this feedback is often received from your future boss, because your future boss prefers, longer answers to know more about yourself and to gain as much intelligence about you. This is not a rule, so again, it doesn't have to necessarily come from, it could come from your recruiter, from whomever else. So this is about, the advice. It's not for all possible roles, but it comes for some roles. Now, what if, you'd abide strictly by this rule of 10 minutes for each answer? Let's say an interview is 45 minutes, 10 to 15 is, the questions for them, and you're left with half an hour, excluding the introductory, the rapport building, 5 minutes, 25 minutes. That's 2 answers that you would be able to give realistically in an interview. 2 10 minutes answers. Now, I don't think you could pass an interview like 5 rounds of interviews with only 2 answers per interview. I highly doubt that. I've never heard anything such or any even close experience as to this one. So that's why I believe it's highly unlikely that you could employ this successfully throughout an on-site interview process. Now, when does this make sense to give 10 minutes answers? It basically makes sense, when you have something interesting to talk about. You have your best story you would want, or you have a very complicated story that's worthwhile developing on. So that's when, yes, you can go for 7, even 10 minutes, especially if you have to explain something complex, right? So now that we look at the extreme of the 10 minutes extreme, let's look at the other extreme. Like, what if you gave 1 minute answers? If you give 1 minute answers, chances are you'll come across as scripted, or probably you'll miss essential details on your answers. So that's not the best possible situation either. So I believe that the main reason why these employers are recommending 10 minutes answers is because they want to see as much detail as possible, so they must get a hold of the example from the first shot. So, in my opinion, so long as you include enough information that your answer is interesting and relevant and makes sense, it's all about finding the sweet spot between those eventually 2-3 minutes and those 10 minutes. It could be closer to 5 minutes. So yes, you could take this, but there's also this danger that, hey, we all do mistakes in interviews. I mean, all do mistakes. Not everyone does mistakes, but for the most part, we all make mistakes. And what if you make a mistake for 10 minutes on end? I don't think that will come across as an interesting experience. So that's why I wouldn't necessarily, I would find it as a very risky approach to go for 10 minutes straight. So this is also something you would want to consider. Then the other thing is that, think of it from an employer's perspective. They want to receive information in the way that makes the most sense for them. It's the same as if with the STAR format. The STAR format is built by employers. It wasn't invented by candidates. And this is in order for them to have the highest degree of probability that they will obtain all the information that they're interested in. rightfully so, you know, so I'm not arguing it's a bad strategy, but what I'm saying is that there's this danger of over-templating your answers and with the risk of becoming boring, which can be an essential element, especially for more senior roles. So all in all, I would very much encourage you to take this advice seriously. On one hand, you know, if someone tells you I prefer long answers, to really give them long answers, but you should always understand that usually the challenge is that the answers are boring and do not contain what they should contain, the information that they should contain. So long as your story makes sense, I believe this is the main thing. The story must be a great one, and you really must ensure that this is the case. Second of all, I believe you should only communicate the information that makes sense, that is relevant. And they could always ask you for follow-up questions, you know, because after all, it's a conversation that you're trying to start there. You're exploring, both of you are exploring on whether this role is the best fit for you. So it's not only the behaviors that are being tested during a behavioral interview, but they also test you for the job fit. So that's why, in my opinion, it is about building a conversation after all. And the chances to build a conversation with 10-minute answers significantly decreased in an on-site interview. So there you go. I hope I give you some pointers when it comes to how to better structure your answers. Simply put, make them as engaging as possible. Think of it as being evaluated on clarity of thought and on quality of the story always. And thank you for watching.